Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay. Okay, so to begin, I wanted to speak about the inspiration of explanatory power. And it's a very humorous but valid view on a type of power. Okay, there's different kinds of power, different scholars, philosophers have wondered about structures of power. But for me as a human being, one thing that I have found to have, some sort of ability in is explaining reality. And this ability was cultivated through years of shyness and observance and introversion, It's as if introverts are, without realizing it, becoming incredible observers of reality, This world is fascinating. We're afraid of ourselves, but we go through it. And then we're afraid of others, but we go through it. And then we're afraid of the species, we go through it. Then we're afraid of the whole adventure of the human legacy, but we go through it. That's the thing about the human being. The divine ability that the human being has is to do the right thing. But not a sort of moral righteousness, It's kind of in the sense of how the ancient Greeks spoke about kairos and chronos, two different views on time. There was time in the sense of chronologically just going forward, but because they entertained the notion of gods, they needed to have a different time when God intervened in man's affairs, right? The gods in ancient Greece intervened in man's affair. The idea of power is strange. Sometimes a person attains a power at a moment when they don't need it. There's been many moments when I was young, I wanted a certain ability to do something. And I didn't get a chance to, have the ability to do that thing, and the moment went forth. But years later, I automatically realized I'd attained that ability. You see, really, it's an emergence of ability through energetic power. So, one thing we find about human life, as many think that it's just a physical journey, it is, But it's also, I mean, it's not just a physical journey. It was simply because we have mouths and ears. And the point of us having mouths and ears, this is the brilliance of the geometry of human design, okay? That we have an inner world and an outer world, and we have mouths to, in some sense, express our inner worlds to the outer, right, to others. And at the same time, we have ears to receive the inner worlds of others. Do you see? It's as if it was always intended to be this. Simply because the creature had mouth and ears. It had the ability. It had the potential, and the ability arose, right? Do you know? And for me, you know, I've kind of obsessed or extremely concentrated single-pointedly on communication being the key. Why? Because when you think about it, like how long let's say 4.5 billion years, that's how old the planet is. And let's say this evolutionary species has had a very long journey on the surface of this earth. It adapted to this future. Do you understand? It's like an entity that is experiencing a different variation of reality. You know what it is? There is one external version of the world where we're all moving in, and then there is internal variations of the external world. So it's kind of like there's one outer realm where we're all of our feet are on its ground, right? All conscious existential entities. That means beings that are aware that they're existing, pretty much. Really, what it is a very strange scenario where meaning seems to be something we have to find outside of ourselves, or feels like something we got to do outside of ourselves, but what we experience, what we access outside is internally happening. So it's kind of like neurons are moving in the brain and we don't know how to explain consciousness exactly. But the incredible thing, you know, these are dualities to cultivate mastery of. Okay? For example, the invisible visible. The, in some sense, still and the dynamic. The empty and the full. So, I guess I'm an example of a human being in history who's had some sort of inspiration to talk this much. And what I have been trying to explain, I feel in every episode, is actually what is the true presence of reality. You know, you cannot wonder about the design of the world without realizing your experiences are accepting that design. You know, I might potentially break like the world record of like a human being who's talked like like a lot about the advanced civilization. I really don't know, on some level, like a lot of life is automated. Some parts of it are in our conscious control. The consciousness, when we wake up in the morning, logs into the day, okay? And when we go to sleep, that moment before we fall asleep, there's a moment where the body is still, and that stillness becomes synonymous with the stillness in space. So the mind finds a freedom to play with the reality, you know? Like, do you understand how bizarre dreams were? There was this poet by the name of Attar, and he's like, yo, you don't believe in the divine, buddy? Look at how bizarre our dreams are. Can you imagine somebody like 700 years ago dreaming of like a printer, right? And he wakes up and tells people, yo, I had the craziest dream. There was this machine, and it's like people would put this paper in it, and it would just write automatically on it. And the person's like, yo, man, that's magic. Get away from me. Magic is when the ego thinks it's in authority. When the power is coming, when the ego is identifying that the power is coming from itself. Divinity is that the power is in the world. You are just a user of reality. Do you understand? Like, sure, from one side of the coin were these creatures that have to train, practice, and have discipline, and of course, attain greater heights of vision and ability and all of this, right? But on another level, it's like the ability is there. Like right now, just think of it, whoever you are listening to me. Well, what has been the content that I have been taken to make videos of? Or the content I have taken to make videos of is the world itself. Endless content, infinite content, so many things we don't understand, so many things we've accepted but never wondered if there's other angles to. So anyways, I'm going to bring my attention back to this idea of explanatory power, okay?
If you're someone who hasn't tried the game Street Fighter,
Okay, here, I'll say this. Pretty much, how is explaining something power? So, explaining something is power because it creates opportunities to interact with that reality, okay? An explanation is an attempt to understand. If the explanation is accurate, it becomes understanding. But the idea is, by understanding, you have access to more consciousness of the moment. You see, why are human beings going to knowledge? What is even learning? Right? Do people ever think about this? What is understanding even? It's like you're this energy, you're this fire, and every new experience you have can either expand this fire or diminish this fire. But overall, it's always expanding. And this world is an honorable journey of a candle witnessing its own flame just being extinguished. You know, we cannot ignore that there will come a time where we will all meet the unknown. Right now, we have the luxury of being a known entity. There is laws in a world to contain us. Do you understand the luxury? That's like something's built for us. It's as if existence is a gift for the mysterious. I don't know. You know, this world is so bizarre. It's kind of like you're born as a human being, and then every day, which is a sequence, a series of actions. So it's like a series of decisions. And so really that's what happens. We're never the person we started off as. And we're constantly making decisions, shifting our attention of what the whole moment means. Whoever you are, I want you to for a moment consider, like, how many different human beings have lived on this earth? How many different types of eyes have received sensory perception? And how many different types of minds have in some sense responded through variations to the single thought? Like, you know, it's so bizarre. It's like when we look at the human being, we're like, yo, it's a simple creature in the world. Let's zen it out. Right? But then from another angle, it's like the most complex. It's like all complexity is simply being. Do you understand? It's like, think about it. What kind of truth would a complex entity look for? It will look for a complex truth, and it will realize that all complexity arises from simplicity. Do you understand? You know, if you are a mortal being, yes, don't accept defeat. You know, go towards eternal victory, right? But if you are an eternal being, or if you are an immortal, like imagine in the future there's something like immortal juice. Some guy goes to the store and it's like, hey man, do you have immortal juice here? I want 2 bottles. And the person's like, sir, relax, you just need 1. You know. And so imagine we had the option of not dying. Imagine there was suddenly an opportunity to never die again. Right? What would life mean to you? How would you behave? How would you feel about everyone? And you know what would happen? The only thing that an immortal and an eternal being has, that in some sense it can do alone, is in some sense to endlessly understand. You see, this is when infinity becomes beautiful, because it's the rest of the iceberg of our dualistic lives. So when I thought how many different types of human beings have walked this earth, and then I thought about how many types of human beings will walk this earth, and then I thought about my own sense of, am I doing the right thing and wrong thing? And I thought, how could I know? And because I can't know, abidance by nature seems to be the correct strategy. Do you know? What that means is like really what we are is a biochemical mechanism that accesses an outer landscape and has the capacity to close its eyes and still internally access the outer landscape. What does this mean? This means the human mind has Photoshop powers, you know? Oh man, this lifetime, you know, it kind of feels like really important, but it feels really like the speed of it is like the speed of civilization is so slow, you know, and it's because of gravity. Like, people don't understand how revolutionary anti-gravity technology is. Can you imagine, like, when anti-gravity technology is going to make beds obsolete in the future? Imagine you just come home and your bedroom has like an anti-gravity switch, and you just press the anti-gravity switch and you just jump into the air, and you don't even have a bed, and you're just there in the air. Do you know? And let's say the floor has this like an invisible force field. Even if you fall and let's say power circuits of the building go out, right, you will fall into this like kind of like, you know, force field. So you never, you know, people are gonna float. You know how awesome that would be? Right, there was this anime on Netflix called I don't know, it had a weird name, The Irregular at Magic High School, something like this. And this guy was like this agent who was also the inventor of flight technology. And in the show there was a scene where they show this guy who invents flight, right, and he shows it to his sister, and the first time it's so crazy because you see the first inventor of flight flying, and it's the most beautiful invention. If somebody says what is the coolest experience of an inventor, the person who can create sort of like a technology of flight that just normally, just in a room, you could just start flying into the air, floating into the air. Do you know how much of a game changer that would be? Do you know how fascinating that would be? Like right now we have land-bound fascination. Pretty much in the vision of an advanced civilization, pretty much everybody is an advanced communicator, an advanced part of the advanced humanity, and the advanced humanity has off-planet and on-planet missions. You know what I realized? I realized, like, why are so many young people drawn towards video games? Even when myself as a kid, I wonder, like, why was I drawn to video games? And I realized because it was an opportunity to express an ability in a context where everybody could see that ability. So what we're really missing out on is the development of pretty much what's going on. It's like Civilization 1.0 had a kind of bright side and a dark side, right? Like a light and shadow side. And right now, a lot of genius ideas are in the shadows of society. You know, to expect the world to understand us, that is, you know, it's kind of bizarre expectation. To expect ourselves to understand the world also seems like a bizarre expectation, but what can we do? I think it's all coming down to a value system. I think the human being, at the end of whatever experience it's gone through, it just sits down and it's like, okay, if I were to revalue life, what value does it have now? And you ask yourself, is the value physical only? Is the value non-physical? Could the value even be beyond shape? And who knows, whether we could have lived better or not, That's the bizarre thing. It just goes forth. Doesn't matter whether we are alone or we're, with everyone. Doesn't matter if you're smart, if you're foolish. Doesn't matter if you're kind, if you're cruel. This world is like this next level power where regardless of what has appeared in it, they're all under the command of change. So do you understand? It's like there's a misunderstanding about reality because we're only valuing it based on the shaped component. Now, if somebody says, what do you mean shapeless component? So I would say it would be a sort of trio division of a visible dimension, invisible dimension, and inconceivable dimension. So if somebody says, Mr. Within, what do you mean an invisible and inconceivable? That means if you open your eyes and you see a tree, that's a visible dimension. Let's say you go and touch the tree. And then if you were to close your eyes and try to climb that tree in your mind, that would be an invisible dimension. If you climb that tree in your mind and you reach the top and then wondered who climbed this tree or who is watching me climb this tree in my mind, that's the inconceivable dimension. The inconceivable dimension is not human in the sense of like it's the point where energy is not a person to itself. Right now, energy, has the luxury of being a personality. When I was younger, the idea of heroes was cool, superheroes, but just like Santa, I didn't believe in that shit. But later on, I realized the superheroes were the beings that were able enough to abide as their true nature. When it comes to the outer realms, physical strength, maybe like physical power is a suggestion of strength, or physical strength is power. When it comes to the inner realms, honesty and trust is power. Do you understand? Like you as a being have an option to be like, yo, what if I just trusted everything from this moment on? You have that option. But the human consciousness has to be cautious. Because when we seek for truth, a sort of romanticism occurs. Right? People don't understand this. In spirituality, it's kind of bizarre. You're falling in love with something that is being everything and nothing at the same time. You're falling in love with your higher self, poetically, right? But the idea is to not be attached to anything, right? It's kind of like this bizarre scenario when we're born, we think like we are what we are and that's it. But in actuality, we don't know what we are, okay? We don't know. And because we don't know, we can know. Imagine right now, I had given the 10,000 talks, right? And because I'd given the 10,000 talks, there was no longer a necessity for me to give the talks, right? But because I haven't given the talks yet, now I have the privilege of giving them, for example, right? It's like, this is what they don't teach, right? That you can look at life, or life can have multiple senses of meaning based on how you view the context that the concept is arose in. You know, there was this video I remember seeing. It was like Christopher Hitchens and this guy it was like a TV interview on YouTube, a YouTube clip. And Christopher Hitchens, this atheist and notable speaker, he looked at the guy and he said, "You, sir, sound like someone who has never heard an argument against your position, who doesn't know the arguments against your position," something like that. As if there's chess openings and different variations of moves. Similarly, human beings are pretty much archiving different perspectives on reality. To explain something means we have interacted enough to have a sort of model, a subjective model on the external phenomena. Like right now I'm looking in front of me and I can say the statement, "I'm looking at a tree." Okay, but when I look at the tree is not language. The tree doesn't know it. I'm calling it a tree. To me, the tree is a tree. But to itself, it is an object without value. Do you understand? Consciousness is giving value, so it ends up becoming the main value of reality. So, explanatory power is this idea that one is taking a new initiative or initiating a new model of the unknown. And this is a very cool thing, okay? Because inventing and designing is not just in the outer realms. You can literally sit down and, like Tetris pieces, begin in some sense creating an inner realm for yourself, For example, for me, throughout the years, I've cultivated certain inner playful, like I can playfully in my inner realms move geometry. What that means is anything I can see, I have an ability to geometrically translate it and then interact with it on a geometric level through my perception. The inspiration of explanatory power. Explanatory power is probably the most important type of power, because it is a power that, in some sense, those who have gone through journeys, pretty much the idea is like, think of it, there's like three types of beings, okay? There's lower, middle, and upper, okay? Or lower, middle, and higher, okay? So, or upper. Let's go with upper. So let's say the lower being is just a being that is learned. Its lesson is to learn to receive. It's like when you're at the bottom of the mountain, the purpose of life in that dimension is to start climbing it. The middle being, or the upper being, in some sense, is just pure expression. The upper being is at the epitome of manifestation. So what that means is God doesn't need to receive anything because it is the ultimate expression of everything, for example. Okay? So the upper being is pure 100% expression. The lower being is 100% reception. It is the middle being where it's like 50-50. Okay? And so that's the privilege of human consciousness, that you can express, which means an extension of your power into the world, or you can receive, which means how you, in some sense, how you receive reality. I mean, really, what is communication? Communication is explaining the world we see to the other. And what is understanding, in some sense, the explanation of these worlds are successful enough, for the moment to get by. One thing I've always wondered, and it's still a huge mystery, to some degree I have an inclination of the answer. But something I've wondered is what in some sense dictates worthiness. That means there's the idea of capability, which means one has worth. And then there's the expression of that capability, which ends up becoming ability. Or I don't know, ability in the outer realms is capability. Or I don't know, maybe capability is your capacity to be able, I don't know. There's honestly, after some point, like nothing else to say. Because there's infinite things to say. That's the incredible thing about explanatory power. It's how consciousness can zoom in and out of reality. And because it can remember how it is zoomed in and out, it can contrast. It's as if the unknown is inspiring knowledge to endlessly know. So the inspiration for the emergence of explanatory power is because there is so much of the world that is unknown that the human consciousness finds that the conscious systems can still know. And I think that's a very, comforting idea, that who we are now may not be all, like who we know, like what we're conscious of right now as what is ourself. Like the totality of that may not be the totality of what we are being actually. It's as if in this room we are human. What about the other rooms? So it's just I guess a fascination for how we're actually an unknown being in an unknown world, rather than an identification with just the middle point of life. Like the middle. What I mean is like if I knew what we were, there would be nothing to say. Let me tell you why. Because the reality and experience of being, the idea is that if there is the limitless, then why is the limited here? If someone sees something better, then let's say somebody sees, let's say if somebody has an option between a old car and a new car, right? They're like, the new car's better, I'm going to go with the better car, right? So similarly, what if somebody gave you an option of an old world and a new world, right? So you would automatically choose a better world, right? It's kind of like the consciousness to the world ends up becoming knowledge, but how there is an awareness, how there is, as the scholars would say, an awareness to awareness, how there is how there is a way, how the moment is knowing that it knows, is incredibly unknown. And that's really where explanatory power shines, I guess. Anyways, thank you for listening. And I guess to completely explain this as a perfect metaphor, explanatory power is equivalent to a lantern, in some sense, in the darkness, illuminating the uncharted territory. So there's a beauty there. So explanatory power is equivalent to like somebody with a lantern. Hilariously, there's this story. Doggies was, a little. Boundaryless as a person. This guy with this philosopher, old school philosopher, he's in philosophical circles known as the father of cynicism, Diogenes. So in the day, this dude gets a lantern, like a candle and a light or something, like a lit candle, and he's walking out in the street with the lit candle during daylight. And everybody's like, WTF? And somebody comes up to Diogenes and he's like, Diogenes, what are you doing? You're wasting that candle. What are you doing? And Diogenes was constantly looking around, and he says, I'm looking for an honest man. That's what he says. But anyways, the idea is it's the explanatory power is how consciousness is like a little flame, and we move around like the soul moves the mind like a lantern in an unknown dark room. Imagine like those old school, mystical, dervishes or something, where they would hold two lanterns with chains attached to them, right? And they would start spinning and dancing, with these lanterns in their hand at night or something, kind of like a martial art but spiritual trance feat at the same time. And you know, there's an incredible centrifugal component to human consciousness, by the way. You know, it's not just like, it's not like just the planet is orbiting around itself. Our brains, every day they experience a new day, pretty much check out what it is. Okay, imagine there's like we have a metal circle, like a giant metal ring, and then one part of the metal ring is like, let's say like 1 inch of it is not existing. Like it's empty, it doesn't exist. So it's kind of like a metal sea. Okay, so that point that it doesn't exist in the circle is the unconscious. You understand what I'm saying? So what it is it's literally, we open our eyes spontaneously in the morning, and then experience, then we come to the end of the night, we go back into the bed, and then we enter the unconscious again. Centrifugal vibes, yeah. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. Share, comment, subscribe, like, join, and it just takes a second. And what was I gonna say? In the comment section below, you know, as a question, interactive question, kind of like, you know, poetic homework assignment for the future generations. What do you think about this idea of explanatory power? Can explaining something be a type of power? I guess let me hear. There we go. So answer below, can explaining something be a type of power? All right, thank you for listening. Much blessings and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.